stand by. Good day and welcome to the Office of Family Assistance National Responsible Fatherhood Clearinghouse Supporting Military Families, Services and Resources for Active Duty and Veteran Fathers webinar. As a reminder, today's conference is being recorded. At this time, I would like to turn the conference over to Nigel Vann. Please go ahead, sir.
Thank you very much, and good afternoon, everybody. I think I can actually say that. No, I can't. It's still not afternoon on the West Coast. I'm sorry. Anyway, welcome to today's webinar. As the operator announced, it's on supporting military fathers, services and resources for active military and veteran fathers. So today we're going to look at some of the unique challenges that are faced by military fathers and their families, particularly during times of deployment and after completion of their military service. So the presenters are going to be focusing on services and resources that are available for military families, and they're going to discuss ways in which community-based fatherhood programs can help veterans and active military in their communities. For those of you who are joining for the first time, we do provide these webinars and other resources as part of our learning community that we invite you to contribute to and learn from. And let me just move the slides along here. So this is sort of a picture of the screen that you're seeing now. So if you, again, if you haven't joined us before, just let me point out that, as the operator mentioned at the beginning, the webinar is being recorded, and so the recording, a transcript, and all the presentation materials will be posted on our website in a few weeks. So you can come back and check those, and you can also find recordings and all the materials from the previous webinars that we've done, which dates back to 2007. We've only done one webinar before on working with military families, and that was either 2009, I think it was in 2009 or 2010, so it has been a while. We always have a question and answer session with the presenters at the end of the webinar, and so we encourage you to send any questions for them by posting those in the box at the bottom right-hand corner of your screen where it says Ask a Question. And you can also chat among yourselves and introduce yourselves to each other in the chat box on the far left of your screen. But we do ask that any questions that you'd like the presenters to respond to, please put those in the Ask a Question box. And you also see we have some resources that you can download. You can download the actual slides from the webinar. You can download a list of helpful resources, and you can also download the bios for each of the presenters. And then in the web link box in the bottom left-hand corner, there's various websites that you can click on, including the National Responsible Fatherhood Clearinghouse and a website for each of the presenters today. Let me move on and just give you a quick overview of the National Responsible Fatherhood Clearinghouse, and you'll see we've changed the picture on this slide for those of you who've joined us before. Enzo, our technician behind the scenes here, has worked a bit of magic with a few of these slides actually, but he's put a little Christmas tree there to get us in the holiday spirit. And as you see, the purpose of the Responsible Fatherhood Clearinghouse, which is funded by the Office of Family Assistance, is to provide a national resource to support fathers and families and those who work with them. And this just gives you a quick overview of how to find us at www.fatherhood.gov. We always encourage people to check out the toolkit, which has got all sorts of tips for people working with fathers, trying to start a program or trying to take it to the next level. And again, you can access the archives of all our previous webinars at the webinar link there. The email that you see is actually in the process of changing, but that still is working at the moment. So email is there, and after it changes, you'll get a message telling you what the new email address is going to be. And we always encourage fathers and practitioners to contact our helpline. It's manned 5 days a week, and you can always leave a message if there's nobody there. 877-4DAD-411. There's trained mediators on the end of that line who can help parents talk to each other. They can provide local resources and connections to local fatherhood programs, and you can always connect with us via Facebook and Twitter. And so today, again, we're going to focus on the challenges that are faced by military fathers and their families, and you're going to be hearing from the three presenters on the screen. Jennifer Donallo, who is with the Clearinghouse for Military Family Readiness, Katrina Johnson, who works with vets in through the Horizon Outreach Program in Houston, Texas, and is herself a former vet or a former military person, and Danny Romero, who's with Social Advocates for Youth in the San Diego area. And I'll give you a fuller introduction to each of those as we move forward. Again, I want to encourage you to download their bios, but also download the resources list. I'm just going to highlight a few of the things on that resources list. There's I don't know how many there are on there, 30 or 40 on there, but I do see in the list of folk who've joined us online is Ben King, and his resource is actually, I think, the first or second on the list because it begins with A. It's called Armor Down with Mindfulness. So welcome, Ben, to our webinar. You'll find various websites that provide support and connections, including the Military One Source, the U.S. Department of Veterans Affairs, which has some online parenting courses for veterans, and there's a Veterans Crisis Hotline, which it's a toll-free phone line. It's 24/7. You can also contact them via online chat or text message, and that phone number is 877-424-3838. I just wanted to highlight one other report on there. It's an October 2017 report from the Child and Family Research Partnership, which is housed at the University of Texas in Austin. They have a report on 3 pilot programs in Texas working with military families and veterans to prevent child abuse and neglect. And the report details various sort of challenging life circumstances that are faced by quite a few military families, often as a result of the frequent relocations and separations, or the physical and or emotional trauma of being deployed, and high levels of social isolation and stress as well. One finding that the authors found surprising was that the number of active duty military families that needed assistance meeting there is a great number of active duty military families that needed assistance meeting their most basic needs, and that included housing and food. The findings also indicate the importance of developing effective community collaborations, although the pilot programs did have mixed levels of success with that, particularly in trying to collaborate with their local military partners. And they also, as all fatherhood programs do, faced some early challenges with recruitment, which were probably sort of amplified with the military families because of the frequent moves and some of the stigma that may be part of the military culture around seeking help. So before I move to our first presenter, I'm just going to ask Enzo to pop up the first poll question for you. We have a couple of poll questions. The idea here is just to get a sense of who's on the line so the presenters have a sense of who they're talking to. So if you could just indicate which of the following best describes the population that your program or organization currently serves. Are you working primarily with active duty military fathers, primarily with veterans? Are military fathers not currently a part of your target, etc.? I'll just give you a little while to answer that. Okay, it looks like a narrow victory for serving all fathers but not currently active duty military, but then quite a few folk are serving primarily veteran fathers, and also a good number serving active duty. So it's good to have you all here with us today. So thank you very much. So with that, let me introduce our first presenter, who is Jennifer Donallo, who's the Director of Research with the Clearinghouse for Military Family Readiness at Penn State University. Jen has been a part of the Clearinghouse for Military Family Readiness since 2010, and she's led the development, implementation, and evaluation of several programs and projects for military families, including the Thrive Parenting Initiative and the Resource Center for Obesity Prevention. Her research interests include the impact of health promotion behaviors on obesity outcomes with an emphasis on parent-focused health promotion interventions. She's got undergraduate and graduate degrees in exercise physiology, and she worked with the U.S. Marine Corps as a civilian certified fitness instructor and personal trainer at Camp Lejeune in North Carolina. Jen is on a mission to promote healthy behaviors by example and through her work at the Clearinghouse at Penn State. With this in mind, she approaches each day as a balance of family time, work time, and physical activities that include trail running, cycling, and group fitness instruction. You sound like quite an inspiration, Jen. So the time is yours. Tell us everything.
Thank you. Thanks for that introduction. I appreciate it. Welcome, everybody. I'm here today, as Nigel mentioned, as the Director of Research at the Clearinghouse for Military Family Readiness. We are here at Penn State University, and we work directly with both the Department of Defense as well as all of the other services in focusing on professionals who work with military families. So providing services and evidence-based strategies and programs to those folks. As you see up on the slide here, our primary mission is to engage in applied research and evaluation, as well as implementation science, education, and outreach to advance the health and well-being of military families. We want to ensure that U.S. military families are supported by practices and programs that are known to be effective based on science and evidence. And this is just a really, really important point. Back in 2010, when we began this partnership, it was just a small grant, small funding to look at programs that currently exist for military families and try to understand better the evidence behind them and really present that evidence base, not an evaluation of the program itself, but an evaluation of the program. So to really look at the quality of the evaluation and understand what is the evidence base behind programs that are available for military families to use and what are the ones that they're already using. The Department of Defense was really interested in really grasping on to programs that had some level of evidence in order to better spend the funds that they have, to know that the programs that they're using are yielding the outcomes that they're intended to yield. So we came in at the ground level in working with them on this, and now we have just really expanded into not only evaluating the evidence, but also into development and implementation of programs, as well as evaluating those programs. We are an interactive web-based platform that involves the selection, dissemination, and evaluation of evidence-based or evidence-informed programs and practices that will help professionals make informed decisions regarding how best to serve these families. I mentioned this partnership that you see up on the screen. Today we have more than $20 million in funding, and we're still growing. We went from a small group of about 4 of us back in 2010 to now we have over 80 faculty and staff. Again, still working directly with the Department of Defense, and we now have service-specific funding as well. You can see in the bottom left-hand corner of the screen, it just shows the makeup of the clearinghouse. We're quite diverse in terms of topic areas. We have 18 PhDs currently, and we all come from different applied research topic areas. So I come from kinesiology, but we have folks from human development and family studies, as well as biobehavioral health, as well as global health. We really have quite a wide arrangement of folks who work for us, and it makes it really, really conducive to covering all the topics we cover in our program evaluation. In terms of military family readiness, you might ask what that is, and we are really focused on providing the best programs at the right time for those families. In order for a military family to be ready, so to speak, that means that they're prepared to effectively navigate the challenges of daily living experienced in the unique context of military services. And I think it's really important to note that while civilian families have challenges as well, military families do have these very unique challenges. And if you just think about deployment alone, but all the training that goes up to the deployment cycle, as well as the reintegration at the end, these are really unique challenges that kind of can throw off the preparation of the daily living of families. So we really do our best in terms of providing these services and strategies to best support those professionals who work directly with the families. It also means being equipped with the skills to confidently function in the face of challenges and being aware of what are the resources that are available. In addition, knowing how to utilize those skills and support when they manage the challenges. So it's one thing to kind of know there are resources out there, but how do I get to them? How do I use them? And how can they best help me do what I need to do on a daily basis? And we just like to note that ready families contribute directly to the service member's state of readiness to accomplish the mission at hand. So we really view the military family as being so important in terms of the support that we offer to them. And in terms of what exactly we do, I kind of went through this in the beginning. I'll just reiterate. One of the main sort of outcomes that we have as our organization, as an applied research center, is we place programs. So I mentioned that we evaluate the evaluations of these programs. So we look at the peer-reviewed evidence that is available, and we look at the outcomes that the programs have yielded. We also develop fact sheets on each program to give the user, whoever that is, whoever comes to our website, a really nice picture of the context of the program. What are the components? What is the evidence behind this program? How much does it cost to implement? And is there facilitator training? And does the facilitator training cost anything? So it really just kind of goes through the nice big picture of each program. It's a 2-page fact sheet. It's viewable on HTML on the website, as well as downloadable by PDF. We also, as an organization, provide evaluability assessments and evaluation planning. You might ask what an evaluability assessment is, and this is where we actually look at programs that exist and we determine if they're in a state that's ready to be evaluated. So we get a lot of requests to help folks evaluate their programs. So we've decided from the get-go to kind of go from the beginning and say, hey, is this program ready to be evaluated? And if not, we share with them the steps that they need to go through in order to get it to that state. And then again, we also do evaluation planning, and we also have some contracts with the Department of Defense and other services to evaluate programs that currently exist. As noted, we also do research, so we actually test and assess the programs that we have developed as an organization. We also implement and evaluate these programs, and we have a really nice sized learning, design, and communications group that help us develop our videos, our all of our handouts that we use. We have a wide conglomeration of visual products that we develop here in-house at the Clearinghouse now. So that's kind of a quick snapshot of us. Just reiterating that we're not just a website. While we do have the website available, it's searchable and trackable, but we also have a really strong implementation and technical assistance team. So if you are looking for a specific program or you're really thinking about a certain topic that you want to address, we have a team that is available during regular business hours, and we always get back to folks within 24 hours. But it's a live support as well as a 1-800 number that folks can call. We offer continued capacity building opportunities for these professionals who might contact us, and we present the facts on the evidence of existing programs. So while you can search for these on your own, again, you can use this live support mechanism and or you can call or email us for additional information. One of the important questions that kind of comes up for us is, what is a program? So we mentioned that we look at the evidence behind programs, but what is that? And it's really important, and we've sort of determined this from the beginning of our existence, that in order to say this is a program, it has to have some type of a curriculum, and it's either a component or a collection of components that are related to a specific topic. Now, the second bullet point that you see there about having a manual or curriculum to guide practitioners is really, really important, especially with the population who we serve, in that we know that folks are not going to pull up a peer-reviewed publication from a journal and look at the methods section. So it's really important that there is a manual that's been published that's available to practitioners and clinicians to go and use with the population that they serve. And this is important to the fidelity of the program, but it's also important for the ease of use for the folks who are using it, so they actually know what the program is, what are the strategies, and how should they be using those strategies. So all the programs that we evaluate, that we place on our continuum of evidence, they all have some type of a manual or curriculum that folks can follow in order to best implement that program. I mentioned here just a second ago the continuum of evidence. This is the tool that we have developed internally and that we use to evaluate and place programs to better understand what is the evidence behind those programs. I know the font is a little bit small. Hopefully it's a little bit bigger on your screen. But you can also download a PDF of this off of our website. I know our website's listed on the helpful resources page that you can download. It's militaryfamilies.psu.edu, and you can download a PDF of the continuum of evidence. The other interesting piece that we have up there on our website is how does our continuum of evidence as a rating scale, how does it compare to other organizations that are out there that look at the evidence behind programs. So we have a comparison chart so you can kind of see how they compare across the board. The one thing that is unique about our continuum is that we have this 5 set of criteria, as you can see down the left side of the slide, and we also kind of place it in a category and then give recommendations for how a program might move up the continuum based on its evidence. So what would need to happen in order for the program to go from promising to effective or from unclear to promising. In addition, the topics, if you check out our website and do a search, the topics that we cover really cover across several categories. It is not just a continuum of evidence for child welfare or one for prevention of violence. It really covers all topics, from parenting to PTSD to suicide prevention to obesity prevention to health promotion. So there's kind of a wide range of topics that you might find on here. But again, if you're looking for something and don't stumble across it, that's why the live support mechanism is there and will pop up within a minute of being on our website. This is just an example of what our search page looks like. So you can see across the top the program search. I put in a keyword. I put in the word fathering, relatable to our webinar today. And I showed you, I just did a screenshot so you could take a quick look before you have time to go onto the website and check us out. But I did a quick screenshot of what the top 2 results look like. So you can sort by title or placement, and the placement is the effectiveness behind that program. But it also gives you information on the topic areas, the target population, what sector the program is implemented in, has it ever been used by the military, and then a quick summary of the program itself. Now, if you were to click over on the left-hand side on the program title, that would take you to the HTML version of our fact sheet, which would provide you with a lot of information about that program. But it is important to note that this second column here, this placement category, that you can click on that so you can see what is the sort of level of evidence across programs that we vetted on the clearinghouse continuum of evidence, and what does that look like all the way from effective down to unclear. You can also do a more specific search. If you look back up at the top of the screen, next to program search, you can click on placement, topic, target population, sector, military use. So you can sort by those factors as well. And then on this next slide, this gives you this isn't the full fact sheet because I couldn't fit it on this slide with a reasonable size, but I just wanted to show you what the top of one of the fact sheets look like in the HTML version. So you can see that it allows you along the top under the name of this program, which is supporting father involvement. You're able to download a PDF from here. It also tells you what the placement is based on the evidence. It goes down into your target population, sector, and topic, and then follows up with your target audience, your summary, and then it gives you a little snapshot here of why the program was placed as promising, as you see at the top in the yellow. From there, as I mentioned before, you'll find a description of the program components. You will also find information about does one need training in order to implement this? What is the cost of the program if there is a cost? And on the back of the fact sheet, we also talk a little bit about what it would take to take you from the current placement of this program, which is promising, to the next one up, which is effective. So we kind of go through all of that. And then, of course, you also see that we reiterate this live chat support that's available during normal business hours. So if interested and you have a program that you're curious about, you can type the name of that program in and see if it's one that we've placed. To date, we have placed 1,145 programs. So there are quite a few of them up there. There are several on fathering and even more on general parenting. So might be something that you're interested in checking out. And that's all I have for you today. Hopefully you have found this information interesting and can check out our resource at the militaryfamilies.psu.edu. But also feel free to reach out to me individually, and I'd be happy to answer any questions you might have or direct you to somebody who can.
Thanks very much, Jen. Very, very helpful. And in fact, you've already answered the first question that came in because Melanie Oliveira, I think it was, asked if we could repeat the website that you were talking about where you find the continuum of evidence. So Melanie, you can see that on the screen right now. That is the website for the Clearinghouse for Military Family Readiness. Jen, can I just ask you a quick couple of questions? So in terms of what's in your database for the continuum at the moment, I saw you have the Supporting Father Initiative. So are they serving fathers in the military at the moment, or are you just including programs that also work in the community?
Yeah, so we do. So we started out way back when we started vetting programs. We started out with specifically programs that the military uses. And then we expanded to programs that are also used with civilian families, but could be used with military families, just to broaden the scope of what's available for military families to use. So yeah, okay. In the 1145 that I mentioned, they are not all currently being used by the military, but they are available for use by anyone.
Good. No, that's a great resource. It really is, yeah. And I really like the idea that you can help programs see how they move up in that continuum. That's a great help for programs, yeah. One other question for you, Jim, in terms of, a lot of people on the line, they're working in the community with fathers, but they aren't necessarily connected to any military bases or any military families. If there is a sort of military presence in their community, could they go online and see what's available there in the community?
So right now on this particular resource, we do not have our programs linked to specific communities.
Okay.
I think so. When I am though looking at this PDF that you provided, the helpful resources, and I would like to say that Military One Source is a really, really great resource in which you can find out information like you just mentioned, and you can also connect with people through Military One Source, which is nice. It's not just a static resource page. You can also connect with folks with specific and ask specific questions like that. So that might be somewhere to go.
Okay, great, very helpful. Thank you very much. Yeah, we'll come back to you at the end with a few more questions. Thanks. Yeah.
Sounds great. Thank you.
Thank you. So now I'm going to move on and introduce Katrina Johnson, who, as you see, is the President and CEO of Horizon Outreach in Houston, Texas, as I mentioned before. I first got to talk to Katrina a couple of years ago when we were preparing for another webinar, which which I think was working with people who were dealing with trauma issues. I can't remember exactly, but she was very helpful. And I do remember giving her a shout out in that webinar, so it's great that we've been able to include you in this one, Katrina.
Thank you.
Yeah. So Katrina began this whole organization in 2010 with the mission of giving everyone a new start. And as she's going to explain, the services include employment and workforce development, housing assistance, and fatherhood and parenting education. Since founding in 2010, they've connected with over 4,500 individuals and families, 2,000 of whom were military families. And they now have over $8 million in funding, with plans underway to build a campus that will provide housing and support services for families. Katrina herself is a veteran of the United States Air Force. She's an executive MBA graduate of Auburn University, and she also spent 17 years in the oil and gas industry as a senior finance analyst managing large multi-million-dollar projects. She's actively involved in the community, serving as an advisory board for various nonprofit boards, as well as spending numerous hours supporting homeless and veterans initiatives. The time is yours, Katrina. Thank you.
All right. Well, good afternoon, everyone. Certainly very excited to be on the webinar and to just share some information about supporting veteran families. As Nigel mentioned, myself, I am a veteran, and I'm a daughter of a deceased Air Force veteran and a sister of a Navy veteran. So I certainly know the specific challenges that military families face, and certainly can expound on that today, and it's just an honor to serve those who have served us. I'm going to start off talking about the first slide, challenges for military families, and some of the needs that we identified here at Horizon Outreach. And this really isn't to scale. We just took probably about almost 300, close to 300, maybe 250 or so of intake forms that we have here at Horizon Outreach, and also looked at some information that was in Inform, as well as on our some of the surveys that we've completed for our program. And one of the things that we saw was some of the resounding themes was that the military families, they really need to have a sense of community. In the military, there was a strong sense of camaraderie. So everyone, regardless of whatever race, ethnicity, background, you know, everybody came together as one, and there was a really strong support system. So when the military members get out of the service, sometimes there's a disconnect with that. Also, family reunification and support, very important. A lot of times when the men and women come back from multiple deployments or from wars or what have you, or just from being disconnected from their families, there's a time when they need to reacquaint with them, for them to get reconnected to them, to understand who they are, and also certainly the family members, you know, they need to spend some time understanding some of the issues or challenges that those active duty military face, as well as the veterans. Employment, definitely a need for employment. Certainly there's a transition from military to civilian life for those that are active duty, you know, leaving the military where everything is kind of lined out for you. You're in a particular position with the military, and then you get out and, you know, maybe you find yourself having to redefine your career path. Housing. Very, very important. I'm going to spend some time talking about homelessness as it relates to veterans, and how housing is definitely a major need for our community. Of course, mental health, substance abuse, and supportive services. Those are three of the other main needs that we found with the fathers or military members that we've served. And a lot of that, of course, goes back to trauma issues. And, of course, with the supportive services, that could range from food, clothing, shelter, and other services that they're in need of. With the next slide, just want to kind of show you a pathway generally that could potentially happen to active duty military members as they become veterans and they transition into civilian life. And certainly this doesn't represent every veteran, but from what we've seen and what I've seen myself over the past 7 or 8 years, and certainly having lived this story with my father, this is potentially the path if they do not receive support and services and get connected in the community. So, an active duty military member, initially they're employed at a very young age. They go into the military, they're employed in a career position. That position could range from finance, it could be gunnery, sergeant, it could be a multitude of things. The next step is being deployed. Not all military members are deployed. Some are, some aren't. I wasn't deployed, but I did serve during wartime. So I had a particular role that I had, my job actually focused on getting the military members deployed overseas or what have you. But let's go back to this. They go from being employed to deployed. And so a lot of times, some of these military members have been deployed multiple times. And so we'll talk about that and how that may impact the family. After the deployment or after their military service is up, then of course they get out the military, hopefully with an honorable discharge. Once they get out, then they face unemployment. And as y'all have probably seen, quite a few initiatives that have been out over the past year about hire a vet, different things that are out there. You certainly understand that there is a definite need to get these veterans employed. Now, if this goes on for some time and these veterans are unemployed, they don't have support networks, they don't have families that support them, then the next step generally what we found is homelessness. And that is so true for quite a few of the men and women that have served our country. When you think about that, look at that transition from employed in a career position to deployed to unemployed to potentially homeless. That's why it's so crucial as we're serving these fathers that are veterans that we're able to link them to the necessary support services, job training, employment, and also housing to make sure they're stable. But the underlying factor for most of them is that there's an underlying trauma issue, whether that's PTSD or some type of physical ailment that they potentially may have, or just a lack of having the necessary retraining skills and retooling to go into another career field. I can certainly identify with this. My father was a Vietnam-era veteran, and, when he came home, it was a different person who actually had gone off to war. And as much as he tried and my mother tried, they were not able to maintain that relationship as far as marriage, and they did end up divorcing. However, one thing that I just remember as a child that he did work very hard to do was to maintain a relationship with his children. And even though he suffered with PTSD, he had some alcohol issues and things, he did manage to do that. So sometimes the Vietnam-era veterans were looked upon in a different way, versus the ones that are getting out now. There was a huge lack of support services during that time frame. So I want to share just a little bit more about homelessness. And that's because this is what we see with the dads that are coming into our program. Now, again, not all of them are homeless, but the definition of homeless in relation to them receiving support services, I think based on the McKinney-Vento Act, is that if you have been homeless if you do not have a permanent place of residence, or you do not have somewhere permanent that you can call home that you're paying rent, paying a lease on, or what have you, then you're considered homeless. And most of the men that come through our program have been. So here's some national statistics that I wanted to share with you, because this is something that the dads face. 39,471 veterans are homeless on any given night in the United States. And this is despite a 45% decline in numbers from 2010 to 2017. One thing that Horizon Outreach is heavily involved in, and I'm not sure if you are in your community, but I would urge you to do so, is the annual point-in-time homeless count that is orchestrated by HUD, Housing and Urban Development. That count goes on all across this country in major cities. And because of that count, that allows the federal government to allocate funds, HUD to allocate funds for housing to these veterans. So it's very important that that count is as accurate as possible. Obviously, we can't count everyone, but it gives them a good idea of where those target areas of the country that they need to allocate funds. Certainly California, Texas, Georgia, those are some of the main entry points for veterans, and certainly Washington as well. Also here it shows that 1 in 5 homeless men are veterans. 1.4 million veterans are at risk of becoming homeless due to poverty, lack of support networks, dismal living conditions, and lack of permanent supportive housing. So some of those men, they may be in transitional housing, which is a shelter or what have you, or again, living with someone else, but they don't have permanent supportive housing, which is so necessary to, just make sure that there's a good environment for the family. 45% of homeless veterans are African American or Hispanic males. And like I said, most of the men we serve that have been veterans, we also found that they were non-custodial fathers. So some of the other unique challenges that are faced by these veterans, of course, mental health, substance abuse, and physical health issues. Some of the current estimates show that 12 to 20% of veterans returning from the wars in Iraq and Afghanistan have symptoms of post-traumatic stress disorder. Although evidence is unclear in terms of divorce rates, research indicates an increase in reports of marital dissatisfaction due to multiple deployments. And, the only way you're going to really capture that information is in your program is if you do some type of survey with the men and women that are men that you may serve, where they're actually telling you, these are the issues that we're having, and this is why this is happening to us. Also, 70% of homeless veterans have substance abuse problems, and 51% have disabilities. What we found with the disabilities, that could be some type of physical disability where they hurt themselves in the military, or that disability could be, again, the mental disability. So those are the challenges that they're dealing with, and that's why it's so important for them to connect with supportive services, with the nonprofit agencies, but also to establish a service claim with the Department of Veterans Affairs. That way, if it is something that happened during service, they can get service connected for it and hopefully, in essence, receive some type of compensation. That compensation can help to support the families as well. Here's some alarming information in regards to suicide rates. 20 veterans a day commit suicide, and this is based on information from the Department of Veterans Affairs. And veterans account for 20% of U.S. suicides. That's so alarming, and, I think it's even broken down even further than that based on other research that's out there. But a lot of this goes back to these mental health issues or different disabilities or just depression that these men and women are facing due to the fact that they're reintegrating back into society and, they lack the support networks or they're dealing with these issues that took place when they were in the military. Lack of support networks, that's really big. One thing about being in the military, and I can certainly remember this when I was in the service, the military is set up in such a way where, they point you from A, B, C, D, or what have you. Okay, this is the time to get up, this is the time to go to your job, this is where you need to go for this appointment. Well, you get out of the military and you don't have that type of navigation. So it's very important for the military members and also, for these dads that we're serving to be able to link them to services. Some of the things that they face is that, again, they're disconnected from their families. They feel isolated. It results in them being able to access the mainstream services. Or another thing is they may feel overwhelmed because there's so many steps to the process. Certainly I know that the VA hospital has had a negative stigma around it because of that, and that's why there has been change to improve that over the years. Certainly they have transportation issues. We see a lot of men in our program that certainly need bus passes or they don't have vehicles. And, it's just quite a bit for them to get from one point to the other. So you got to think about it. Yes, I need to go to a food pantry. Yes, I may need to go look for a job. I need to do this. But then I've got to take 3 buses or so to get there. Discharge classification could have an impact. So whether they got an honorable discharge or bad conduct discharge from the military, that could also hinder their ability to access services because some agencies, especially some of the agencies that provide housing grants, they actually may have stipulated in their grant that they do not take veterans who have a dishonorable discharge. Here at Horizon Outreach, that really doesn't matter so much for us because we're serving fathers. We have less restrictions. However, if a dad has a dishonorable discharge, We want to know what is that dishonorable discharge related to. And 9 times out of 10, it's the result of some type of trauma. Maybe he was on multiple deployments. Maybe he, got into it with an officer or something. But a lot of times it goes back to some type of trauma or something he was dealing with. Locating sustainable employment. So that's really key. Probably about 90% of the veterans that we've served over the years, that has been one of their main goals, is to locate and sustain long-term employment. Now, the veterans that perhaps have an extended educational background, or those that are able to really transition well from the military to civilian life, you won't see a lot of them having those issues unless they've got the underlying trauma issues. But mostly what we're talking about are fathers or military or veterans who perhaps they've gone through other issues since they've been out. Maybe they're homeless, maybe they're unemployed, maybe they've got the substance abuse, the trauma issues going on. So that's where that inability to locate sustainable employment comes in. Also, if you had a military member who probably perhaps was a gunnery sergeant or something like that, and that's a skill that's not easily transferable to something out here on the outside, that could be an issue. But again, trauma is generally the underlying reason why some of them may not be as successful in some of their employment endeavors. One of the things we do here through our program is we teach the healthy relationships training using the active relationships curriculum created by Kelly Simpson out of Dallas. And she has a specific book that is active relationship skills, military resiliency, and it really does focus on deployment, how to deal with coming back after deployment. It talks about PTSD, and it really talks about conflict resolution and different things. That's very important if a veteran is going to work somewhere, because his supervisor may not be aware that he's going through these various issues, but if he had a better understanding of that veteran and some of those things he's dealing with, then he would know this may be why he's reacting to situations the way he is. So it's very good to have for the supervisors as well to know some of the things that these veteran fathers may be going through. So some of the services provided by Horizon Outreach through our Horizon Eagle Fatherhood program. First of all, we provide priority services for active duty and veteran fathers. Now, here in Houston, it's a little bit different. There's not an active duty, huge active duty population here because we don't have a military base. We do have reserve units, but we don't have particularly active duty other than reservists or the National Guard. So, but needless to say, we do provide priority service. So whenever the men and women are coming to our program or whoever is served, we make sure to identify up front, are you a veteran? And that's on our internal intake form. And once we identify that, the first thing we want to know, are you service connected? Do you have a disability? Are there any trauma issues? Because most veterans are service connected. They have some type of service-related injury or something. And maybe they haven't gone to the VA to file their claim, but we do provide linkages to key claims representatives over there who can help them with that process. They're also assigned a case manager who works specifically with them, and they assess them for trauma. So we have a PTSD trauma scale that we do, that tool that we use to determine if they have any symptoms or issues with PTSD. Also, we do an ACE trauma. We do that for all of our clients, which is adverse childhood experiences, as well as an in-depth case management assessment. Now, the case managers that are here, they're not trained to provide any type of trauma care here. We're just mainly trauma informed. However, we do have partnerships with domestic violence agencies, with other agencies that provide additional counseling or what have you, where we can refer these fathers there. Also, the Vet Center is a really good resource. It is a branch of the Department of Veterans Affairs, and for those veterans who do not want to access services through the Department of Veterans Affairs, they can go there and speak directly to a peer support navigator or someone one-on-one about some of the issues they may be going through. Something else that is very important and most agencies are not aware of, there is funding out there for housing for veterans. So if you have a veteran to come through your program, they say they are homeless, they are in need of support services, there's something that exists that's called SSVF, Supportive Services for Veteran Families, and that is a housing assistance program. Certain agencies such as Goodwill, they are funded, Salvation Army, and what they can do is provide rental utility assistance. In some cases, they may even pay up to 6 months for rental assistance, or, to get someone off the streets or into housing. They also provide legal assistance, child support assistance, not child support, child care assistance. When I say legal assistance, legal aid, just as far as very minor cases. But they provide a lot of things through that SSVF program. Also, educational opportunities. We link the veterans to educational training and opportunities. So there's a plethora of training programs here in Houston, free training that's offered perhaps by the Houston Area Urban League, Goodwill, US Vets, different ones where the veterans can go through the training and get certifications. And here at Horizon Outreach, once they complete our fatherhood program, the parenting classes, relationship, and job readiness training, we will pay for a flagger certification to work at a construction site, also for TWIC card to work at the Port of Houston offshore, or even pay for their forklift certification. So there's quite a bit that we can do there. Other services, ID assistance, that's very important. A lot of them don't have proper ID, or they have surcharges on their driver's license. If you can provide assistance with that, that's great as well. And I already talked about legal peer mentor, and certainly clothing assistance and food assistance, definitely that. Also, some of the tips for engaging active duty military and veteran fathers. Definitely, it's very important to offer an environment that promotes camaraderie and inclusion. That is what they're used to. That's where they thrive. And certainly that's how we have our fatherhood program set up, where when they come here, they feel like they're a part of a family. They're given an Eagle number, and they feel like they're soaring, and they have a brother or sister that they can rely on. Partner with agencies that serve fathers or offer relevant services, especially military fathers or families. Provide assistance in applying for veteran claims, vocational rehab services, and housing assistance. Utilize peer support mentors. You can make fathers in your program peer support mentors for the other military fathers. Offer family retreats and activities focused on family reunification and conflict resolution, and we do that probably about once a year when we do our recognition of Horizon Eagle Day or on Father's Day. And also, you would like to provide engaging services, employment assistance, career readiness, and linkages to mainstream services. One thing that I know well about veterans, and I guess the best way to put it, they can recognize a fraud immediately. So if you tell them you're going to do something, they're going to hold you to it. So you always want to make sure you don't overpromise on something if you can't deliver it. That's pretty much all I have to say about veterans.
Thank you very much, Katrina. And I
Yes.
really want to emphasize, one of the points you made about the importance of support networks, because I was actually at a session recently where Mathematica were sort of unveiling some of the early findings from the Parents and Children Together, the demonstration projects, which you may have heard of. And
yes.
One of the things they pointed out was that a lot of the fathers in their programs just didn't have more than a handful of people who they could really rely on. It really is a need for a lot of fathers, and so it's interesting to see that it's the same for guys coming out of the military, and perhaps even worse in some cases. But so it's,
And can I just add? Yes, let me just add one more point. In every community, well, I guess the major cities, I'm not really sure, but I'm sure that there should be some linkage to a continuum of care, a COC. And here in Houston, we have a COC. And the COC is pretty much like a partnership of all of the nonprofit agencies within that community. There's agencies within that COC that actually do serve veterans. So for those of you that are interested in serving veterans, link with the COC. That's another good way to link with agencies that have housing grants, so that you can also provide that as an additional support for your veteran fathers.
Oh, that's a great tip, Katrina. So how do they contact the community of care? Do they just
I would just
that?
Google continuum of care for whatever
Okay.
area, wherever they're located. Yes,
Great.
COC.
Okay. Well, thank you very much.
Yes, you're welcome.
Okay. So, Enzo, if we could have the next poll question, we'll do that quickly, and then we'll move on to Danny's presentation. So, we're just interested. You can indicate up to 3 of the following. But if you do provide services of any active duty or military fathers, what do you see as their greatest needs or challenges? And even if you're not providing services, you can also chime in on this. But
Mm-hmm.
I think I'd have a hard time making the choice. But yeah.
Mm-hmm.
What would your top 3 be, Katrina?
Well, I'm looking at this. I said, man, that looks real similar to what I said. Definitely employment, homelessness, and definitely the relationships, because that's family relationships of being able to connect with anyone, when they get out. Mm-hmm.
Yep. Yeah, it certainly looks like in terms of the responses we're getting here, healthy relationship is the number 1, and number 2 would be health and employment after service.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
And you see homelessness is slowly inching up. And
It is, yeah. No, and it's such a major issue. It really is, yeah.
Yep.
Yeah. Okay, well, thank you, everybody, for your responses there. And now I'm going to introduce Danny Romero, who is the senior, let me just move to your slides, Danny, there we go, is the senior program director with Social Advocates for Youth in San Diego. Social Advocates for Youth is known as SAY. Danny has worked in San Diego nonprofit sector for 12 years now. He's overseen the SAY San Diego military-focused programs, which include a program called Dad's Core, since October 2016. He first became involved with this work while he was in graduate school. He connected with the San Diego Military Family Collaborative, which is an initiative to support military families through sharing of community resources and information. He's also served as an AmeriCorps member and provided workforce development support for youth and adults by utilizing technology to enhance their opportunities for upward mobility. And I can vouch for this being a good program. I got to go there a couple of times. It's been a while, but Danny, tell us what you do in San Diego.
Well, thank you very much for the introduction, Nigel. It's a pleasure to be on with all of you, and I can say from the West Coast, now it's afternoon from my standpoint. So, let me get started just to let you know a little bit about SAY San Diego and the work that we do. So, in 1971, SAY San Diego started developing programs and key services to not only connect to the youth, but also to the family and the community surrounding it. And so there's a lot of empowerment that goes through, and in a lot of ways is multi-layered and tiered structured to not only serve military families, but we're also civilian focused. And so different populations, including refugees, low-income individuals, Hispanics, Latino communities, and more. And so today gives you kind of I'll be giving you kind of a different perspective than my fellow presenters. For myself, a lot of this work is civilian focused and community based. And, one of the key aspects before I kind of dig a little deeper is just to let you know that, you don't have to necessarily come from the community to understand and connect to it. And so one of the biggest pieces that I'll share with you is that for myself, I grew up and live in San Diego, a very military-connected community. And for my father, he actually served in the Navy during Vietnam, but when he finished his term of service, he put away the uniform and really never looked back. And so, I was one of the military dependents who really did not identify or connect with the community, and you will find that in your, your programs, you may have individuals who may look at their term of service in a similar light, and so having them kind of identify, as Katrina mentioned, with some of the survey tools is where you're going to start finding that individuals will connect or identify as part of the community. So some of the work that I oversee is really focused on connecting to military families in our local community. San Diego and the local area around me is actually indicative of one of the largest, if not the largest, off-base military housing for active duty families. And so that comes with obviously a large net I'm able to cast, but also it comes with its own set of challenges. As Katrina mentioned, this is a community that you may provide a service, but having a military family engage the service may be an entirely different landscape. And so it's really important to establish rapport. And so let me start kind of obviously getting towards the slides today. So when we talk about military specific programs, we have 6 that we'll kind of throw out there, and that includes Dad's Corps, which is our military father program. We have services rendered out of our Military Family Resource Center. We have a First 5 First Steps home visiting program, which allows some of my staff into the homes of military families to connect with moms, actually, in developing healthy relationships with their child and making sure that they are developing healthy milestones in terms of their child's development. We're going to talk about play groups a little bit more down the line, but really it's a lot about parent empowerment and making sure that we're creating a healthy community. So as I move forward, the fact of the matter is that Say San Diego, as I mentioned, is a civilian nonprofit, and really we would try to bring a strengths-based approach in trauma-informed care. And so there's a few resources you may want to look at as well and download. But if you're not familiar with the terminology, it's just a basic understanding that trauma it shows up in a lot of different ways, whether it be psychological, physical, or emotional. And I think the best thing that you can do is really start becoming very attuned, if your program is not already in tune with this kind of interesting dynamic, because there are different signs, there are different patterns, there are different ways of connecting with individuals that you may be serving in the future. And so, one of the things that I really want to emphasize is that with your staff or your facilitator, or if it's yourself who's starting a program, it's really important to remain attuned to that strengths-based approach. And, I'll build on that shortly. So working with military families, I think it comes, especially if you're not in this community already, it comes with its own vantage point from a lot of, I will say, civilians. And I think that oftentimes we associate the following characteristics of being hardworking and dedicated and organized, disciplined, and intelligent. And those adjectives are all part of this community, but there's more that exists, as military is its own set of culture, and it does provide its own different, sets of language, acronyms, and hierarchies. And I can tell you and attest to the fact that, in San Diego, we have multiple branches of service here, and they too have their own structures. And so while I would love to tell you it's an easy community to engage with and kind of learn from, it's one of those that the more you put into it is the more you'll get out of it, meaning that, showing up and connecting to your community in different outreach events, different opportunities to connect to command leadership, and not always looking at command leadership, also looking at those who just may be a better mouthpiece for you in the community. And so what does that look like? That might look like having an ombudsman or a family readiness officer carry a message up the ladder, so to speak, so that you're able to garner the same support from command leadership without having to always step foot on base. And so one of the things that I feel is a common misperception about military is that especially with active duty, that they're always given every resource available, and that they don't necessarily require as much support as other families and other communities. And oftentimes, this is not the case. A lot of this is well informed with Blue Families. They put out an annual survey, and I invite you to check that out in the resource center, the resource page that we have provided for you. But more often than not, we're going to find that, some of the families are more along the lines of a single parent household where, because of deployments or because of marital issues, you may find that there's single parent households where mom actually is overseeing the care of their family. And dad has to find a way to reintegrate, as some of my fellow presenters have mentioned. And so other things that compound some of these issues include child care challenges, and especially with the members of service who are enlisted or lower ranking individuals. They do have a basic housing allowance, but with regard to qualification of certain programs, in California we have our CalFresh, CalSNAP, which is oftentimes known as a food stamps across the nation. But for a lot of them, the qualification into these programs really is challenging because of having the basic housing allowance included in the income qualifications. And so understanding those obstacles make it important to kind of pull resources to do things like food distributions into the future. And so one of the other aspects to really think about are that a lot of these individuals are coming from all parts of the nation, and with that being said, they're not always stationed where their family may reside, and so lacking a support system or creating a system of kind of social isolation is very kind of indicative of this community. So really finding creative ways to bridge that gap is what we try to do, and so I mentioned play groups earlier. And so playgroups were a way for us to kind of create a natural stage where families felt comfortable in coming to our facilities just to have an opportunity to bring their child and to really, no pun intended, have fun and play. While we do usher in some information or education and as a part of the process, it really is important to create social fabric in your community. And, part of the program that I oversee right now, it looks more like 60% active duty members, 30% veteran, and about 10% civilian. And it's an interesting blend. And so for those who are on the fence of really considering, well, should my program be focused on veteran or should it be active duty or civilian focus, there's no harm in understanding that all of these create a rich blend that really do work wonders in terms of your group setting. And I think the more perspectives, the merrier. But when it comes to veteran families also, these are not necessarily the same issues that active duty families are facing. And so with regard to veteran families, that assimilation to civilian life, the camaraderie or brotherhood that we've kind of already mentioned, and really kind of peeling back the layers, it's almost like a loss of identity, that this individual had a certain rank, a certain position, and that is how more often than not they would even introduce themselves. And so walking into a civilian world, it is not always the easiest thing in the world to do. And, as Katrina mentioned, even things like creating a resume for employment, you really have to crosswalk and take time to work with these individuals and making sure that they're prepared for their next steps. So one of the additional factors to really consider is also the community makeup around them. And so, some communities are very much so connected to military. Others may be small town communities, but finding ways to make sure that a service member is comfortable in connecting to the services around them is very important. These individuals oftentimes are in transitions, and so a 2 to 4 year cycle is something that the community itself may feel might be a deterrent in starting a program, a fatherhood program, especially if you're working with active duty, as their stint in your community may only be a few years, and so the propensity of getting them involved is not always the easiest thing to do. And more often than not, as I mentioned, that social isolation is very high in this community, and so finding creative ways to create social fabric is important. Also, when you're working with a community, language does matter. And so, I would love to tell you there is a dictionary for everything, and there probably is to a certain degree, but there's trigger words that you should avoid when working with this community. And so understanding that a term like support might be better used versus help, or PTSD is oftentimes thrown out there regularly from the community, and it's not a blanket, and everyone that I can tell you that is reflective of the community really would like to have most civilians understand that the most important thing is that they are an individual. This is not a one-size-fits-all, and the most important thing is to once again develop that rapport. One other factor to consider is that perception versus reality. That many service members have a great shared experience that can do wonders for a program. And so, connecting to your services and having a great experience oftentimes can boost the visibility of a program. But sometimes that chain or linkage may come across its own misnomers about services, and so sometimes we'll see that in terms of what on-base supports are for or civilian resources, and so it's really important to demystify that whenever possible. Other factors to consider when working with military families is that, peer navigation that we brought up a little bit earlier was just a very comfortable setting for many fathers to engage this community, and so I've given two examples that we have here locally, which is Courage to Call and 0800. And these agencies really do a great job in, number one, employing veterans who have come from this line of work and kind of doing peer navigation to help them connect to different resources in their communities. And 0800, as we've kind of alluded to, the transition from active duty to veteran status is very challenging. And so the group does a great job of providing peer navigators. Additionally, we're going to also really want to emphasize the fact that, this is a holistic approach, and so the more layering, the better. And so finding ways to engage the spouse in this process is very important as well. And so making sure that we're doing our best to incorporate, the whole family is extremely important. You're going to find there's a lot of resources out there in terms of mental health first aid, and so really it's an opportunity for you or your staff to get trained. Oftentimes they're an 8-hour course, and doing a quick Google search of what's in your community really is worth the effort. And more often than not, a lot of these trainings are made cost-free, so please check those out. And so, as you start developing the programs around you, really think about how you're going to handle those deployments or transitions, because, especially when working with active duty, you may have a break in service. And so, having a way for them to connect back to your program is vital and ideal. In our Dad's Corps program, we utilize battle buddies to keep one of the participants connected to an alumnus who will usher them through what's happening while they may be deployed. Really taking time to establish the culture of your program from the start is very important. And so, as I mentioned, with the rich blend and mix with civilian, veteran, and active duty members, you really want to take time in your first sessions to develop that common ground. And I think, many of you who are in this work already take time to, do ground rules or to set up goals. Really, it's an important piece that I feel like gets missed on a regular basis, so please try to do your best in creating that piece. But more often than not, just think about those extra supports that your families may need. So, as I kind of conclude today, just knowing that, with different active duty and veteran families, they have different needs and oftentimes different challenges. And so, with active duty, you want to think about how to get your messaging out there in a very concise format. We do our best to provide childcare and dinners so that there's an opportunity so that mom gets the night off and dad is able to obviously sharing some quality time with their children and also learn at the same point in time. And so being very efficient on that level helps us engage the community, and making sure that veteran fathers have an opportunity to reconnect to a community that's lent so much to them and has been a part of their past. Our program is led by a veteran who is a former gunnery sergeant. And, one of the things that I can attest to is that civilians themselves have shared with us that it's one of the most unique glimpses into the military community. So, if you have civilian fathers who are interested, please allow them at least an opportunity to sit in on a session if you haven't had that opportunity before. And most importantly, understand that with any program design, you need to think about how you can be a connector in a community and understand that the world around you has a lot of different supports, whether it be for food assistance, legal assistance, and connecting into those worlds and making sure that maybe they can come out to do pro bono work in addressing your fathers can make all the difference. I think one final kind of vantage point or interesting look into at least our Dad's Corps program is that service or volunteering is a very important facet to the work. And so what we do is a quarterly service project, whether it's feeding the homeless, whether it's creating a community garden. But these are key ways that there's promotional opportunities within every service branch, and one of the facets they look for are volunteer service hours. And so finding common ground in creating projects that they self-select rather than you prescribing is a way that you not only empower but you help promote the fathers in your programs. And so, as we close here, really understanding that it takes a village, we say often. And so these are two different groups that I've highlighted for San Diego Military Family Collaborative and San Diego Veterans Coalition. And those groups or those collaboratives really do create a rich blend of resources. And so, if it's not there already, it doesn't take much to set up a community meeting and inviting other folks to the table to talk about how they're supporting military families. And as Katrina mentioned, there's service gaps out there. And so, here's a few things you should start thinking about if you have yet to start a program. And last but not least, finding those unlikely partners. And I think I'm going to highlight just the theater groups right now. Especially in this time of year where there's a lot of holiday cheer out there, you'd be surprised about how many military families benefit from attending theater. It's a great way to bring in the family unit for fun and a memorable event. And so, as I will leave you with, really just find ways of incorporating the participants of your programs to give back. So we create that buddy system, empower them, and have them, create a council and have them weigh in on decision making. And then last but not least, educate your staff around them as to issues they may be faced with. But, it's all about having fun and creating that great forum for them to engage. So thank you for your time. And here are some of those resources I discussed a little bit earlier, but you will once again have an opportunity to download these slides. And if I could highlight one that makes sense on this page, it's a web-based group called Psych Armor Institute. That's a federal group, and they do a great job of familiarizing those who are unfamiliar to the community on a lot of the different facets they may not be familiar with in terms of military. So thank you very much for your time.
Thank you.
And thank you, Danny. Yeah, and we appreciated some of the resources that you had shared that we got to add onto the list there. Yeah. So we've got about 10 minutes now to answer a few questions. You can still ask a question. If we don't get a chance to ask it of the presenters, we'll see if they can answer later, and then we'll post those responses, as I mentioned, to the website. Has Jen joined us back? I know we lost you for a while, Jen. Are you on the line with us?
Yes, Nigel, I'm here.
Welcome back, or maybe we didn't lose you from the audio, I'm not sure. But
Sure, absolutely. Nope, I'm here.
Okay, cool. I've got one specific question for you, Jen.
Okay.
Just asking about the sort of tips that you can offer. So do you have a way of offering any sort of tips on best practices if a program that you reviewed is not actively used by the military, but that it could be used with the military? Would you be able to recommend a program for someone who was looking for that?
So it would depend. So yes. So basically what we would do is if somebody were looking for something specific for the community or the group of people that they're working with, we can search programs by the components that exist within them to find out what programs are out there that encompass those components. In terms of just general strategies for fathering, they usually kind of fall within those components. So if you know what you're looking for, you can kind of search by that as well. In terms of just regular, just general tips, I don't, specifically fathering is not my area of research. While we do a lot of research on parenting and health promotion opportunities within parenting. I know that one interesting, and I'm kind of answering your question, I'm kind of adding to it, but one piece of information that I think is really interesting about this webinar is that the Department of Defense is really stepping up its efforts to explicitly include fathers in the programs that they're using. So I think that's really important to note. When we think about a lot of parenting programs, they seem very mother-focused, which is okay because it's important that they're included. But the DoD is really starting to take special efforts to make sure that they're selecting programs that have a fathering component to it. So I think that's a really good move by them.
Yeah, that's great to know. It really is, yeah, because one of the other questions we've got here is actually sort of asking whoever would like to respond to this. But I mean, there's a lot of sort of general programs in the community, as we know, that are serving fathers. But not that many are connected to the military. So there's some services in the military, but they're not all necessarily working with the dads either. But I'm just wondering if any of you have any advice for sort of a community program that might want to try and develop a more effective, or to develop any kind of partnership with the military. Would anyone have any tips for how someone might do that?
Hello, this is Katrina. You know, one thing I would say is within your community, if there is a military base or a reserve base, perhaps to see if you can reach out to, I think they call it, well, they may call it something different now, but what is it, wellness and morale, something like that, family readiness.
Wellness.
Yes.
MWR. Yeah.
That's correct, because that's what we did with a couple of the reserve bases here in Houston, and they were like, oh, yeah, we definitely need you to come out and run your fatherhood program. So that would be definitely one major way to engage with them, because you know, those sergeants or, you know, those who are over those troops, they know the specific challenges they face. They know that they're in need of support services and resources within the community, but they don't know how to connect them to those resources.
Yeah, very interesting, actually. And so particularly given what Jen said, that there is more emphasis on that now, you might have a more receptive audience there as well, yeah?
Yes.
Yeah.
Let me sort of ask,
no, go ahead, Danny. Yeah.
You know, I know that we do work with a lot of family readiness officers, or FROs, and also ombudsmen. They are the mouthpiece to the not only the active duty member, but to the families themselves. And so making sure that you're starting to tap into those groups. Sometimes there's outreach events or opportunities, but they also, you know, we do have a unique blend that you will find in school systems. So there's school liaisons, and so, you know, I would also recommend, you know, just to, you know, if you're working with Navy, type in, you know, Navy school liaisons, and you'll find that, you know, no matter what state that you're representing, there should be at least one office to call into.
Interesting. Let me sort of flip that question on its head a little bit, and so for programs in the community again who may or may not be connecting with very many veterans, would you have any tips for how they might reach out to veterans more intentionally? I took Katrina's point about asking that on the intake form. You know, a lot of programs may not even know up front if the guy is a veteran or not, but if you wanted to intentionally involve more veterans in your program, what might be a way to reach them in the community? How do you do it, Katrina?
I'm sorry. I was listening, and I was like, well, he did say the intake. Could you repeat that again, Nigel? I'm sorry.
I'm just wondering if you have any tips for programs in the community that might want to more intentionally involve veterans in their services.
Mm-hmm. So who they should reach out to?
Find them. Yeah. How they're gonna let those guys know they're there,
Oh, okay. Well, first of all, if you can get one veteran to be your mouthpiece, trust me, he's going to spread it to the community. And you need to have something that you're bringing him there for. If you're just saying, oh, we're going to be offering this curriculum and this and that, they're not going to come. But whether it's some type of incentive, even the peer support meetings, if you can get a peer navigator or somebody to come on site and talk about resources or talk about claims assistance, or as Danny said, those peer support navigators, the vet center, it's in every city. I'm almost certain of that. If someone has some type of issue, they just want to talk about some of their experiences. Veterans love groups. They love where they can talk to, in a group setting and feel a sense of camaraderie. I would also reach out to the workforce centers. There's a veteran representative there. And so if you can get your flyers there and tell them that you're offering services or whatever, they will send them if you're offering a viable service. They will certainly send the referrals to you.
Okay. Well, thank you. One quick question here, and then I'm going to start wrapping this up. But do any of you know of specific programs that focus on helping children who need to sort of adjust and adapt to their fathers coming back into the family?
Yes, I can start on that level. One of the programs that we have here locally is Focus. You'll find them in your resource page as well. And some of the work that they do is really to focus on the resiliency piece that military families face. And so that oftentimes is connected to deployments and understanding that, dad may be gone, but, the family unit themselves benefit from a lot of the services that are out there. So that's one group. I'll let my fellow presenters weigh in.
DePelchin Parenting Center, DePelchin, D-E-P-E-L-C-H-I-N. They've been around for about 100 years, and they offer a lot of parenting classes, workshops, nurturing parenting programs. They have a quarterly retreat for veteran families where it really focuses on reintegration and allowing the parents to really engage with their kids and learn positive ways to parent and to engage with them. And it's really fun. They take them to a camp. They do it on a quarterly basis. They take so many veteran families. A lot of great positive outcomes with that. And if I'm not mistaken, they use some of the tools from Kelly Simpson's curriculum, Active Relationships.
Oh, interesting. Actually, could you type the name of that program in the chat box, Katrina, just so people can see it?
Yeah, I can. Hold on a second. Let me type exactly so you'll have
and
it.
I'll also say, that on the resource list, if you've downloaded that, there's a few other programs there that do these kind of family retreat things. Let me ask, I'm actually going to ask John Allen, who is our federal representative, if he'd like to have a quick word before we finish. And I'm going to come back to each of the presenters and give you an opportunity to leave us with a final thought. And I'm going to pose one question there as well that you may or may not want to answer now. You could answer it after the fact when we get your written responses. But we did get a question. This is basically for Katrina and Daniel. In working with veterans who did not receive honorable discharges, how would you help them navigate their situation? So you can either answer that or just leave us with a final thought. But before I do that, John, would you like to add a word for the audience here?
Sure. I want to thank our expert presenters, Daniel Romero, Katrina Johnson, and Dr. Danello, for providing this good information to the practitioners and the grantees who are attending this particular webinar. Thank you so much for giving us some understanding about how to address this population. Very important. And just thank you really for taking the time out to be involved. So I just want to really express that because more experts and folks we get doing the work that are telling and explaining to folks how they do the work, I think it provides a different perspective and allows them to take that information into their communities and see how to implement in that process. So thank you very much.
You're welcome.
Okay.
Thank you. Thanks for the opportunity.
Yeah. So any final thoughts from each of the presenters? Let me start with you, Jen.
Sure. So I think this is really a timely webinar. Like I said, I feel like it's in the program development that we're doing with our Thrive initiative around parenting and health promotion. We're really being, it's being requested that we have very explicit strategies and information for dads to be inclusive in these programs. And I just did, while we were talking and while I was listening to everybody, I did a quick search on our website. And for example, putting in the search term fathering yielded 39 results of programs that specifically focus on fathering behaviors. And most, if not all of them, are community-based programs. Not all of them, actually very few of them have been used with military families, but there is a handful of programs that have some evidence here, so I think that's really interesting as well. And so they're, just sort of highlighting this resource. Not all of the programs may have the components that one is looking for, but certainly there are some that do. And I think it would be a good place to go just to check out programs that might be beneficial for populations that you work with.
Okay, well, great. Yeah, no, it's great to know we have a sister clearinghouse that can help move this work forward. Yeah. Katrina, final thoughts.
Yes. Hey, final thought as a veteran, they served us, let's serve them. Short and sweet.
Wonderful. Yeah, okay, great. Danny.
Yes. I think at the end of the day, everyone in this world who's working on fatherhood just understands that it takes something special to be a dad. And, you wanting to get involved is very, very important in that process. And so, this is a community that, pays it forward and then some. So, hopefully you're able to take today's knowledge, apply it, but understand that, this is a community that's not meant to be put under a microscope. If anything, it's just meant to be there to help support them in their next steps.
Okay, well, thank you, Danny, and thank you, Katrina, and thank you, Jen. This is it's a really important conversation, I think, for fatherhood programs in general and family support programs in general, the way we can offer more support for military families as we go forward. So we look forward to continuing this conversation. So with that, I'll bid everyone farewell, and please take a minute to complete the short evaluation that's going to pop up at the end of the webinar. Thank you very much, everybody, and have a good day.
Thank you. You as well. Thanks, Nicole, Nigel.
And the presenters can stay on the line for just a minute if you've got time.
Sure.
Okay.
Gladly.
And this concludes today's webinar. Thank you for your participation. You may now disconnect.